Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in a few minutes. Nice to see some familiar names in the chat. Please add your name and where you're calling in from, and we can get to know where everybody is from. We have Southern California and Oregon, Jacksonville. Let's see here. So great. We have Turkey, Nebraska, Jessica from Canada. Welcome, welcome. Keep adding. Nice to see everyone. Hi, Mark. Good to see you on. And Anne joining from Maryland. We have Monterey, Michigan. Nice to see everyone. Welcome. We'll get started in just another minute. Please add your name in the chat and where you're calling in from. Hi, Karen from California. Nice to see you. And Lindsay from Pennsylvania. Celeste, welcome, welcome. Nice to see so many familiar faces. We'll get started in about 20 seconds. And you're in for a treat today. We have some wonderful presenters. Hi, Liz. We have Brooklyn. We have Central Coast in California. Okay, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I am Judy Brous. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and really thrilled that you could be here with us today for this topic. We're really excited about not only the topic, but the speakers and what this means for the work we all do as educators. And as you know, this is about the results of a survey we did with our partners at Edge Research. And it's all about climate education focused on K through 12 teachers and administrators. And really, I want to thank all of you who sent in questions. If we were to answer all the questions, we would be here for a couple of months, but we are going to have a follow-up. We hope to talk about what do the results mean for the work that we all do. And as I mentioned, we have a great team of presenters today, and I will introduce them more fully in just a minute. But Lisa and Pam are from Edge Research, and Sarah Bodor is our Director of Policy and Affiliate Relations. And as I said, Lisa and Pam will be taking the lead on talking about the survey results, some really interesting findings that give us more insights into the challenges that are facing teachers and administrators as we talk about climate change education, as well as what are the opportunities for us as educators. And after Lisa and Pam talk about the results, if we have time, Sarah will talk about a few things that NAAE is doing with our partners. If we don't get to this, we will include all the links in all the materials that we send out to you, so don't worry. And I do want to say that climate change is one of our strategic priorities at NAAE. We're doing a lot of different things and working with many, many, many partners around the world on climate change education. We also know that teaching has never been more challenging than it is right now in many parts of the world. If we just look at what's happening in the United States and the pushback on public education and the attacks that are taking place, not only climate change, but on equity and inclusion and so many other things, it's really a tough time. And so we're trying to figure out as educators how we can help support the education system and the policies that will support educators to do this work more fully. We also know that young people are really worried about the future. It's a huge number of people that are worried, of young people that are worried about the impacts of climate change in their lives. And it's a big number of adults that are worried about climate change. And you'll see that again in the survey results and what we're all learning. But there is, along with the negative news, there's a lot of good news, a lot of people working in all aspects of how we can support educators and do work to address the climate emergency. So there really is a lot of good news. And we have more data on what teachers and administrators need and want. And that's the big news too. So if you're new to our webinars, we try to bring new ideas and topics and speakers to help us all learn more and share cross-disciplinary on what we're all doing and how we can improve our practice. If you have ideas, please send them to us. We're always looking for new ideas. And I want to thank all of our affiliate partners and co-hosts. If you're not a member of your state affiliate or regional or provincial affiliate, please check them out. It's a great way to be part of a wonderful network that's doing environmental education work across North America. I also want to thank our sponsors at EPA and E360 Plus who are help supporting the webinars, and they are thought leaders on all of the work that we are doing. If you don't use Zoom, just remember you're all muted because we have so many people online, but you can always talk to us through the chat as you are, and we would love for you to continue to add comments, resources, and as you're listening, questions that come up, and everybody will get a copy of the recording, the slides, and the chat. So you'll have all the resources that are linked into the chat at the end of this. And I just want to thank our captioner. We're doing live captioning for anyone needing help with the audio. Just click on the CC if you need help, or email any of us or in the chat if you're having technical issues. And a huge thank you to Anne, who is managing our webinar series and is so wonderful to work with. And she is the Director of Professional Development and the manager of E360 Plus. So Anne, thank you for everything that you do. And now I am so excited to introduce our speakers for today, and I'm so lucky that I get to work with all of them. We were really lucky to work with EDGE on this survey. They are terrific. Lisa and Pam, we just couldn't have a better team. And I worked with both of them when I was at World Wildlife Fund so many years ago. Hate to talk about how many years ago it was, but I'm just going to give short intros to each of them and then turn it over to Lisa. So Lisa works on public interest and social change at EDGE. She focuses on conservation and sustainability, and she supports what EDGE is doing on civil rights and inclusion. She has conducted research for so many groups, from the Nature Conservancy to the Southern Poverty Law Center to Aztec and so many others. And she also has done research for CWEB and worked at the Melman Group and has just years of experience on doing this work in conservation, sustainability, and equity and inclusion. So Lisa is amazing and Pam is amazing, and this team, because Lisa knows so much about conservation, sustainability, and all of that, and Pam is an education guru, again, has been working on in marketing research for more than 3 decades, works with universities, nonprofits like us. Her passion is education, and she co-leads EDGE's education practice, which includes early childhood, K through 12 curriculum, and higher ed and adult learning. She has a passion for social emotional learning and equity in education, and she consults for many, many, many organizations across the country. So Lisa and Pam have been terrific to work with. And last but not least is Sarah, who is our Director of Policy and Affiliate Relations, and she facilitates our Coalition for Climate Change Education Policy and works with everything related to policy and climate change, as well as strengthening our affiliate network. So lucky to work with her and have her on the team. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to Lisa, who's going to kick it off, and really appreciate all of you being here. And I will stop sharing here in a minute. Sorry, it's trying to find this stop sharing button. There we go. Welcome, Lisa.
All right, thank you very much, Judy. I'm going to start sharing. Go into present mode there. All right, so just to jump right in and get us started, let's talk about what we did with our National Survey of Educators. Are you getting a message about Zoom quitting? I just want to double check. This is something I can ignore.
No, we're not.
No.
Looks
Okay.
good.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so Lisa, maybe share again. Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you. You're on mute, Lisa.
You're on mute. Yep. Here we go. We'll try again.
All right. Yeah, I
There
think
you
that
are.
I think that was the weird Zoom, what the Zoom was trying to tell me. It like rebooted itself. So sorry for the false start, but let's dive right in. So our survey reached 812 public school educators, 707 teachers, and 105 school, district, or state administrators. We were in the field last August, so just at the start of the 2022-23 academic year. And what we did to make sure that the survey would be representative for the teacher sample is we used some of that NCES data that gives us some information about demographics, geographic distribution, school types, grade levels taught, et cetera. And you can see on the right-hand side, our actual distribution of teachers by setting and subject. So robust sample size for our elementary, middle school, and high school teachers, and then controlling that sample for the core subjects, science, math, social studies / history, and English language arts, but not excluding any teachers in the K through 12 environment. So we have our other subjects, elective subjects, are also represented in this sample. On the administrator side, we have about roughly 40% of our sample, almost half, that are administrators at schools, so principals, assistant principals, or some other locally based or physical building administrator. And then we have the other 60% of our sample either at the district level, or we have sort of a handful of state level people in our administrator sample. Let's start with the mindset on climate change. Where are we today? Well, educators accept that climate change is real. When we look at the sort of fundamental attitudes that have been measured by the Six Americas study for decades now, we see that both teachers and administrators are a little bit ahead of the public in terms of accepting that climate change is something that is happening, and accepting that climate change is caused mostly by human activities. So definitely our educators are in line with the scientific consensus on climate change. In addition to that, they're also invested in the issue. We asked a few different questions to get at this. How important is the issue of climate change to you personally? Who do you think is going to be impacted by climate change? And we find that nearly 7 in 10 teachers and 8 out of 10 administrators feel that climate change is an important issue in their own lives. At least 66% of teachers believe that they will be personally impacted by climate change, at least a moderate amount, if not more than that. We find that 6 in 10 teachers feel that their community will be impacted by climate change, at least a moderate amount, and nearly 1 in 5 say that their community has already been impacted by climate change. And perhaps most importantly, and very consistent with being teachers, they express the most concern about impacts to future generations. Over 8 in 10 teachers feel that young people today are going to be impacted by climate change. They also agree that there's a responsibility to teach about climate change. And this is some interesting data. We look at teachers and we look at administrators. They're on the left-hand side of this chart, teachers in yellow, administrators in blue. And we see that 74%, so nearly 3/4 of teachers, believe that climate change is going to have an enormous impact on students' futures. And it is irresponsible not to address this problem and the solutions for it in school. Beyond that, and there were some, I think, questions in the early part of the webinar about climate anxiety. These teachers tell us that their students have brought up climate change in the classroom on their own. So half of teachers have had that experience. And nearly half are telling us that their students are worried or anxious about climate change. So they're seeing that and feeling that climate anxiety in their own classrooms now. When we kind of break that down by the setting that the teachers are in, we kind of look at the developmental spectrum of the students. we see that, whether you're in elementary, middle, or high school settings, teachers agree that this is an issue that should be addressed in school. When we move over and we take a look at where students are bringing up climate change organically, where they're expressing anxiety, here we see this manifesting more so in the middle school and high school grade levels. Still, nearly half of elementary school teachers say that they have young students who have brought up climate change in the classroom, and over a third have experienced a student with some level of anxiety or worry about climate change. Let's look at some of the other side of the spectrum. So we see that teachers are concerned, that they care, that they think it's an important subject, but what are they worried about when it comes to teaching climate change? Well, we asked, how worried are you about parent complaints when it comes to teaching climate change? And we find that 50% of teachers are in fact worried about parents complaining, and even more administrators, nearly 2/3 of administrators worry about parent complaint. On the other side of the spectrum, we allowed for administrators and teachers to feel that climate change is a political issue and perhaps it doesn't belong in the classroom. Here we see teachers, with far less agreement with that point of view. We still have a third of teachers that feel like maybe climate change is too political for the classroom, but we see nearly that, 2/3 number of administrators just worried about the politics of climate change and bringing it into the classroom. We looked a little more closely at some of those numbers based on the individual's own political leanings. And when we break that out and look at, worrying about parental complaint, we see that teachers who self-identify as liberal on the social issue spectrum are a little bit more likely than teachers who are moderate or conservative to be worried about parent complaint. But when we go over to the other side of the equation and we look at the attitude around, climate change as a political issue that doesn't belong in the classroom, we really see that attitude manifesting most strongly among teachers and administrators who identify as socially conservative. We also had our teachers and our administrators tell us what they think parents want on climate change. And here you're really seeing that teachers are all over the board in their understanding of what parents want taught about this issue. They had the choice of saying they think parents believe that students should be taught the scientific consensus that climate change is real and human caused. Do parents think students should be taught that scientists disagree about climate change? Or do parents think students should not be taught about climate change at all? And we see teachers in that yellow bar really kind of all over the place. A third of them are not sure. They have no idea what parents want. We have about a quarter that think parents want the scientific consensus taught. We have another quarter that thinks that they're supposed to teach that scientists disagree. So really just no clear sense of what their own community, parent community, wants from them. The administrators are a little more decided on this issue. Just about half of them say that they believe parents want the scientific consensus taught on this issue, but we still have a third that believe that parents would want their kids to be taught that scientists disagree about climate change. So really just kind of no clarity about what the parent community wants. So I'm going to pause there before we go into the next session and see if there's any burning questions. Pam, do you see any in the chat?
Not yet, Lisa.
Fantastic. Still gave me a chance to have a sip of water. So let's talk about what is climate change education policy and what do teachers know about what this policy might be in their schools and in their district. We asked the question, does your district have formal policies or goals for addressing climate change in any of the following areas? And we broke it out by building and facilities improvements or management, curriculum, community partnerships, governance, transportation goals, and civic engagement. And you can see here, as we look at the teachers who are in the yellow bars and the administrators who are in those blue numbers in the column down the right-hand side, that there is a significant disconnect in the perception that there are formal policies or formal goals for addressing climate change in any of these areas. Where teachers and administrators are the most likely to see formal policies in action and to agree that they're in place is when it comes to building and facilities management. That's the most visible place where they can think that there's a formal goal around climate change. The next place is curriculum. And here we have about half of teachers who think that there's formal curriculum goals in place on climate change, but we have 79% of administrators who believe that to be true. And that disconnect kind of grows as we go down the line and look at community partnerships or governance. We dug in a little bit more deeply on this and took a look at what teachers' perceptions are about formal policies and goals just based on the setting in which they're teaching, elementary, middle school, or high school. So elementary is that kind of pale orange, then we get to orangey orange and a darker orange for high school. And across the board, for the most part, middle school teachers just see more visible goals around climate change happening around them. It's not huge margins of difference, but it is significant in a couple of places, especially around facilities improvement and around formal curriculum or learning objectives for students. Middle school teachers are more likely to report those. When we probe into this a little bit more, we wanted to find out, of a variety of topics, including climate change, but topics that touch on sustainability or conservation. Do teachers perceive and administrators perceive that these are parts of the formal curriculum? And it's interesting to look at what is happening between teachers and administrators on this set of topics. So if we are asking about environment and nature awareness, teachers and administrators both say in large numbers that's part of the formal curriculum, and teachers and administrators are, not exactly the same in terms of reporting that, but they're pretty close. Then we go down to sustainability. We still see large majorities saying that sustainability is formally included as a concept in the curriculum or the learning objectives, but we also see a 10-point gap between teachers and administrators on that issue. Conservation and environmental protection, a little bit less likely to say that that's part of the formal curriculum, but still majorities, and that 10-point gap again. Then we get to climate change, where you see a much bigger disconnect. So first of all, among the least likely of the topics to be reported as formally included with learning objectives, and the biggest gap between teachers and administrators on that. When we dig in a little bit more and we look at not only the setting in which the teachers are teaching, but also whether they're teaching core subjects or non-core subjects, here we see a big gap where elementary school teachers are really the least likely to report climate change as being included in the formal curriculum. And it doesn't matter if you are teaching the core subjects in the classroom or you're teaching non-core subjects. You're less likely to think that that's a reality in your school setting. And we see that at the middle school and high school level, particularly among science teachers, they're the most likely to report climate change is actually included as part of their formal curriculum. This kind of lack of clarity about whether there are formal learning objectives around climate change is tied together with really varied perceptions of what administrators want taught. So remember, we looked at that chart a little bit earlier. What do people think? What do the teachers and the administrators think parents want to be taught? Here we're asking teachers, what do you think administrators want you to be doing? And again, we see teachers with very little guidance, not certain what administrators want from them. 32% have no idea. Another third think the administrators would want them to teach that climate change is real and human caused. We have nearly a quarter who think that the administrators would want them to teach that there's scientific disagreement. And this continues. If we ask about what we think the school boards might be wanting them to do, what state education officials might be wanting them to do, teachers are just lacking guidance on what administrators at every level want from them. When we ask teachers, regardless of all of those things, what do you think the goal of climate education should be? We got some interesting responses, and we've kind of put these in order of the weight of the comments that we received. So most of the comments, and this was an open-ended question, teachers tell us that it should be a topic that is focused on as a problem to be solved. Something that is a challenge for us, but there are things we can do about it. So many of the comments were really focused on not just teaching the crisis or the problem of climate change, but also teaching what needs to happen in order to address it. And there's some representative comments that you can read for yourself here. The sort of next most common set of objectives around climate change education that we saw was just this desire to put it in the context of a larger set of stewardship values. So here we're seeing teachers who are talking about, putting it in the context of, not being wasteful, of being more conscious of our natural resources, the broader context of sustainability, of reducing and reusing and recycling, those types of things. And then finally, and this was probably the lowest number of comments that we registered, but still nonetheless they registered. There are some teachers who look at the goal of climate change as to sort of lay out information for the students, but encourage those students to form their own point of view on climate change. And you can see some of those comments are reflected here in these examples, but just asking students to come up with their own explanations for climate change, the impact, what we should do to really address it, basically sort of using it as a way to inform critical thinking. So I'll pause there before we get to the report card and just check in again to see if we have any burning questions on the data so far.
So Lisa, the one burning question that seems to be coming up is around the wording about scientists disagreeing and, that not being the case. So why did we ask the question in the survey?
That's a great question. And we really use that metric in part because one of the longstanding metrics around the 6 Americas data, the study that Yale does and tracks the changing of American public opinion about climate change over time, has included lines of questioning about that. I think not because that's a fact by any stretch of the imagination that scientists disagree, but because it was something that was promulgated for a long time and was used as a way to create doubt in people's minds about whether climate change is real and whether it's actually happening or whether it's human caused or not. So it was sort of a barometer of whether people believed in climate change or didn't believe in climate change. So that's why we used it.
That was the burning question that is getting a lot of chatter. So,
okay, excellent.
Lisa, one other question that did come up is how geography influenced the data here. If there's anything you want to say about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we did control our sample so that we have representation, geographic representation based on population distribution in the survey. And we did look at that on a number of different dimensions. There's a few times in this data where we're going to touch on that. In some places, especially, when it comes to inclusion in formal curriculum, we see that number much higher, the reporting of that on the West Coast states than we do anywhere else in the country. We see the biggest differences on some of our questioning really by political geography, whether you are working in a state that is sort of the governorship and the legislature are controlled by Republicans controlled by Democrats or split. And some of those differences we're going to call out in a little bit. Any others?
I would just keep moving.
All right. So let's see what kind of grades teachers and administrators are giving their schools and their districts on climate education. It's a good day for this. We were chatting before the webinar since we had the nation's report card come out on civics and history, which was not great news. Let's see how we're doing on climate education. We had the chance for teachers and administrators to rate their own school for its climate change content. And this is really independent of inclusion in the formal curriculum, right? This is just how would you rate, whatever it is you might be teaching or resources, et cetera, in your school. And we see that overall teachers net out at a C for the climate change content in their school. Administrators are a little bit more generous and give their schools a B-. Administrators were also asked to rate the district and the state in which they work. And again, we kind of see these B- grades across the board. So let's unpack that a little bit. If we just ask administrators and teachers, regardless of formal curriculum, is climate change being taught in your school or in your district? We see one of many big disconnects between administrators and teachers. So only 39% of teachers tell us that they're teaching climate change, but 73% of administrators say that it's taught in either their school, their district, or their state. So that's, a big disconnect. It makes some sense because administrators are kind of leveling up, to across the district, perhaps, at least, for many of them in our sample, they're not just locally based. When we look a little bit closer at, teachers who report teaching about climate change, we see that it's that middle school and high school science. So at that grade level and within that subject is where we're most likely to find teachers who are personally teaching about climate change. And we see, perhaps not surprisingly, the lowest reports of that among math teachers and our elementary school core teachers, also, relatively less, much less likely to be teaching about climate change. When we look across the grade levels at where climate change is happening and climate change content is being included, we really see that it's concentrated in kind of the middle school to early high school grade levels. So across, all grades, 17% of teachers reported that, this is where they think climate change is being taught in these following grades. And those numbers kind of go up a little bit in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And this allows us to really kind of focus on, this big gap at the K through 5 level in addressing climate change with young students, even though we saw earlier in the data that elementary school teachers are telling us that their students are bringing up climate change on their own, and they are sensing and measuring some level of climate anxiety in these young students. If we layer on what administrators told us about at what grade levels climate change content is included, we again see, some of that disconnect, especially at the elementary school level. So administrators are a little bit more likely to be, in lockstep with teachers' perceptions once we get to 7th grade, but down in those lower grades, administrators seem to have a different idea about how much, climate change inclusion, especially at the 4th and 5th grade mark. We also wanted to know how teachers would rate their school in terms of not only climate change content generally, but integrating climate change across subjects. And here we see much lower grades across the board, with over a third of teachers giving the school a D or an F in terms of integrating climate change across content. When we ask what they want or what they would like to see, though, and that's the chart you're looking at in the middle, majorities, large majorities, by, both teacher setting, grade, and subject, they would all like to see climate change integrated across different subjects. We also asked teachers and administrators to tell us, well, which subjects do you think climate change is being taught in? And we see that it is firmly in the science classroom. So by far and away, either general science or environmental studies is where they believe climate change is being addressed. We also wanted to do a holistic report card. Meaning if we want to look not just at the science of climate change, but we want to start thinking about it as an interconnected issue, an issue that touches many different aspects of our social, economic, and cultural life. Well, how are we doing? We broke it down and we, had our teachers give a grade for each of these aspects. And what we're going to show you first is, where the grades are not so bad. Maybe they're averaging around that, B minus level. So when it comes to the science of climate change or the steps we might be able to take to reduce climate change impacts, we're seeing, about a third of our teachers rating their school curriculum and content as an A or a B. When we start to dig into some more specifics, we see some shifting going on there. So impacts on biodiversity or climate change's role in natural disasters, not bad, but that number, that percentage that's rating a D or an F is now starting to come close to or equal the number of teachers who are rating an A or a B on those particular things. And that kind of carries through if we're talking about societal impacts, if we're talking about consumerism as part of the solution, if we're talking about project-based learning, we're starting to see those D and F ratings come close to or equal the A's and B's. Where are we really not getting it right according to teachers? Environmental justice. Here we start to see the D and the F rating exceeding the number of teachers who are giving an A or a B to their school. Same thing with bringing in Indigenous or diverse perspectives about climate change and climate change impacts. And when it comes to mental health support. So kind of thinking about that threat of anxiety through this data, teachers are saying we are much closer to failing when it comes to the mental health supports around climate anxiety than we are to passing. A lot of what we've been talking about so far kind of ladders up to the fact that there is a significant confidence gap among teachers when it comes to teaching climate change. Only 1 in 5 teachers report feeling very informed about climate change. When we ask teachers to tell us, how confident do you feel addressing any of these following topics with students, the kind of positioning of climate change is right in there with mental health and guns in schools in terms of teacher confidence level in taking on that topic in the classroom. If there's even a teeny piece of good news in this data, it probably came from my colleague Pam, who noted that at least with social and emotional learning, while 5 years ago or 6 years ago, we probably would have seen that also much lower, there has been real focus and energy put to social and emotional learning, and that number has risen over time. So it's not impossible to boost that confidence. When we look at where the greatest confidence lays, the most confident teachers tend to be in urban school districts. They tend to be teaching advanced placement courses or the science teachers, or some of the younger teachers in our sample, so fewer than 10 years in education, sort of feel the most confident about addressing the topic. Whereas our lowest confidence scores by a full 11 points off the average are among elementary school teachers and those in suburban districts. In addition to that confidence gap, we see a preparedness gap. So we asked teachers, how prepared are you to teach about climate change? Varies somewhat, not too much, not at all. On average, 57% of teachers said they're at least somewhat prepared to teach about climate change. That's the lowest among our elementary school teachers. But when we kind of shift over to the resources that they would need in order to teach about climate change, we're seeing a resource gap there as well. So do you always have the resources you need? Most of the time, only some of the time, or never? And when you look at those bars, we see our most prepared teachers are those middle school and high school science teachers who kind of sit around most of the time. They have what they need. And our least prepared teachers are those elementary school core teachers and those middle school math teachers. That's not a surprise. If we sort of, average that out across all teachers and all subjects, we have over half of teachers who tell us they only have the resources they need some of the time or never to teach effectively about climate change. So I'll pause there and see if there's any burning questions before we talk about closing the gap. What do we need to do?
Lisa, I guess the one burning question that I need to find is basically about the disconnect among administrators. So administrators believe climate change is happening, yet they are concerned about the politics of it. Yes, that is true. Is what the data is showing. So sorry, I could not. It's like 15 chats above where we are right now. So
no worries. That is absolutely the case. They may feel and perceive the problem of climate change one way, but what they perceive to be their reality in the school community or in the parent community in which they work could be very different.
And then there's a lot of comments around parent perceptions and the fact that the parents that complain are a small minority, but they're a loud vocal minority and they are active. And just clarifying that this was a survey among educators, not a survey among parents, but there is definitely data to support that, and many people have shared links.
Wonderful. All right, well, let's see what we can do. What are some levers that need to be pulled or resources that need to be created to help us close this education gap? So a lot of pieces need to be put in place. And this is one of the places where we start to see teachers and administrators come a little bit closer together, at least on the most important things that need to be put into place to support effective teaching. So first and foremost, developmentally appropriate climate change education materials that can span early childhood through high school. And you'll see a little bit later some anxiety among teachers, especially teachers of young students, on how to effectively teach about climate change. Partnerships with community partners, the opportunity to create experiences for students. That's also seen as important by both teachers and administrators, although administrators find those community partnerships to be a bit more important than teachers do. Professional development, also key. Essentially, there's nothing that we asked about that teachers and administrators didn't feel would be helpful or needed in supporting effective teaching. In the survey comments, teachers talk to us not only about having developmentally appropriate materials, but interdisciplinary materials as well. So at the elementary school level, we see some worry that, some of the concepts associated with climate change might be more than their, primary age kids can handle. Teachers talk about being completely unprepared to talk about climate change in the classroom and just sort of assuming this is something that's going to get handled at the middle school level. When we talk, have kindergarten teachers in our sample, and some of them really raised, how they might want to couch or frame climate change with students that young, to kind of simplify it. And, some of the comments talked about, sort of making it a little bit less scary. At the middle and high school level, we really see the call for professional development come out loud and strong in some of the comments, simply not knowing enough about the science of climate change to feel confident teaching it, being a specialist in math, knowing that you would need some additional training. And being able to incorporate it in a naturalistic way, among some of our English language arts teachers and others, looking for ways to kind of bring reading materials or creative materials into the classroom around climate change. We also start to see a lot of data that supports this idea that signals from the top are going to matter. So we asked teachers and administrators, regardless again of formal curriculum, what do they think is going on? What do they believe is happening? Teachers and administrators tell us that they believe that state policies and federal policies addressing climate change are important to be able to teach effectively about it. Administrators tend to feel that a little bit stronger. And district policies on addressing climate change in the facilities and the schools' operations, that those kinds of actions would be important to support effective teaching. We also see where what teachers believe administrators and authorities want impacts whether or not they are teaching climate in their classrooms. So if teachers think that district administrators are supportive of teaching climate change and teaching that it's real and that it's human caused, if teachers believe that, 50% of them report that they address climate change in their classrooms. If they don't think that district administrators support and believe that, they're more likely to say that they don't teach it. And that kind of is at every level of administration. So kind of going back to the beginning where we saw teachers have no idea what administrators want from them. We also see how their perception of what they think administrators want really influences whether or not they're going to address climate change in their own classrooms. And as many comments noted, about this kind of influence of the perception of administrators, for me to be able to teach, I not only need reliable material, I would also need permission from my school district. Another way in which we see that these signals from the top matter is when we ask teachers and administrators, who plays the largest role in effective climate change education? Well, if you're a teacher, you are the more likely to kind of put yourself at the top. So either is the most important or second most important. 45% of teachers said, I'm the person who can play the biggest role in effective climate change education. But right below that is state government. Likewise with administrators, while they put themselves at the top, they put state government even higher than school administrators or district administrators in terms of supporting effective climate change education. And this is interesting. We broke this out and looked at the difference based on whether the teachers were teaching in a state with a democratically controlled governorship or legislature or Republican controlled legislature and governorship. And we see that kind of belief that the authorities or the powers that be support teaching climate change is real really varies based on the state that you live in. So if you are a teacher in a quote unquote blue state, you are more likely to think that your district administrator supports the teaching of climate change. You're more likely to think that your school board is supportive of it, more likely to think that your state government is supportive of it. Doesn't have any influence on what you think about parents. So again, just that perception that climate change education is supported makes a real difference in teachers' ability and willingness to tackle it. One of the kind of flip sides of that, though, which can also present a challenge to teaching climate change, is sort of the intersection of the urgency around teaching about climate with other education concerns. So we looked at this by urban, suburban, and rural school districts. And, we're showing you here on the left that kind of scorecard, report card rating for how well a school is, how they'd rate the climate change content in their school. And we see that urban teachers and urban school districts are much more likely than those in suburban or rural districts to say that they have good or excellent climate change content. At the same time, when we ask about agreement with this idea that there's too much emphasis placed on climate change when there's other issues that we need to address in education, we also see our urban school teachers agreeing the most strongly with that point of view. So we can kind of see the push-pull here. On the one hand, urban teachers might be operating in environments where they're more receptive to climate change education and find that it's more important to include, but they're also being pulled in other directions with other problems and issues in education they have to deal with. Last but not least, these last couple of slides really point to how important curriculum is and inclusion in the formal curriculum in terms of climate change education. So when we look at that preparedness to teach about climate change, we have 43% of teachers overall who feel prepared to do this. But if teachers understand or believe that climate change is part of the formal curriculum, we see a much higher number, 57%, who feel prepared to teach about climate change. And that translates into having resources. If climate change is included in the formal curriculum, we get to 40% of teachers saying they have what they need most of the time, with another 19% who always have the resources they need to talk about climate change. Those who don't have climate change in the formal curriculum, 53% of them said no, they never have what they need to teach effectively about climate change. And the amount of time being spent on the topic is also influenced by whether or not climate change is part of either formal curriculum or learning goals, learning standards. So just in the interest of time, we'll dip into the last couple of slides about what teachers want in terms of resources. When teachers have access to good climate change resources, it builds their confidence to teach the topic. So when teachers have resources most of the time, 74% of them feel confident addressing climate change with students. If they don't have resources, less than half the time do they feel confident. Under-resourced teachers wrote open-ended comments talking about how they have tried to find resources on climate, and you sort of see the problems here. Whatever I can find on the internet. I try to teach both sides of the political argument. I just tell them what I can remember about what I heard. Other teachers having more success reaching out to find their own resources, represented in some of the comments on the right, probably referencing even some of the organizations that might be on this webinar today. What do teachers want most? Really, they want current materials that are solutions oriented. So for their students, they want lessons that can draw on recent events and examples. They do want some sense of technical education that can help prepare students for the way the economy is going to change, how jobs might change to head us toward a more sustainable future. And they want resources that help them teach about resilience and solutions. We asked them about formats for resources and professional development. And when it comes to that, videos win the day, whether that's professional development or classroom resources. We all know that teachers have a lot on their plate. So ready-made lesson plans are something that teachers really, really want. And as we get into, sort of classroom resources in particular, hands-on or small group activities, interactives, those are things that teachers really want for their students. So just to kind of take a step back and make sure Sarah also has some time to share what she has to share with you, and kind of boiled it down to 5 top takeaways from the survey. Teachers are concerned about, they want to teach climate change, their students are bringing it up, and some of those students are expressing real anxiety. At the same time, we see that both schools and school districts have not made climate change education a priority. There's a lack of inclusion in formal curriculum, a lack of preparation and resources, an unclear mandate, and all of that sort of ladders up to, if climate change education is happening, it might be happening somewhere in middle grade science. This means that overall, we're getting very middling ratings for climate education from our own educators in public schools. We're seeing a confidence gap on the teacher side and a fear of addressing the topic on the administrator side. And the things that are going to help move the needle and make a difference are getting those signals from the top, from school administrators or state administrators, that climate change education matters and is important. When teachers believe that their district and their state supports climate change education, they are more likely to be prepared, feel prepared, and actually teach the topic. When teachers think about inclusion in the formal curriculum, they're going to need resources, they're going to need professional development. And what they want the 3 R's of climate education to be are resilience, relevance, and real world solutions.
Lisa, thank you so much. That was so helpful and so many great comments. Pam, is there anything you wanted to add before we turn it over to Sarah? But that was terrific. Thank you.
No, just a ton of amazing resources in the chat, and shameless plugs as people have self-described them. And I think, Judy, you said the recording will include the links to the
Yes.
chat for people.
Yeah, we
Okay,
will send that and more resources. You will have so many resources. And Sarah, do you want to share just a few things from NAAE in the last minutes? But Lisa and Pam, thank you so much. Such great thinking and work. And Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then Anne has a few final comments. So hang on just a little bit, but thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, and I apologize because I'm having a hard time sharing my screen, but here we go. I just want to share a few additional resources that we've been working on in an effort to kind of help this ongoing collective ability to learn about and to take action for climate change education. And I just want to very quickly highlight a couple of other pieces. This survey for NAAE was part of a package of reports and activities that we've engaged in over the last 2 years to help us really understand the current ecosystem when it comes to climate change education, and in particular, climate change education policy in the United States. So just really quickly, I want to highlight that in addition to the survey report that we went through today, we also have a K-12 landscape analysis that looks at where does climate change education policy show up in state policy across the United States, and that's available on our website. We are finalizing a similar report on policy for climate change education in the higher ed space, and that's going to be available to all of you very, very soon. I saw there was a question in the chat about the role of non-formal education, and there's a lot to unpack there, but we are participating in a survey that's open right now that's really taking a look at how the non-formal education community is engaging in education, whether it's in partnership with formal education or in terms of engagement with the general public. And that's part of a global analysis. So it's a pretty robust survey, and we can share that as part of our series of links following up on this webinar. We're also trying to track pockets of innovation and write those up as case studies, and then looking at opportunities to engage conversations around policy. We recently convened a group of partners to look at what are the tools and resources that are needed at the federal and state level, and we're hoping to continue that conversation. Also, just want to make a note that under development right now are new guidelines as part of our Guidelines for Excellence series in environmental education, our guidelines for empowering climate change action. And we're really excited about this. If you're familiar with our Guidelines for Excellence series, they really help to provide best practice and frameworks for what we know is most effective based on the research. And we're doing that with a number of advisors and experts from all over the United States. We also, in an effort to increase those signals from the top and get support more climate change education policy, we a couple years ago launched the Coalition for Climate Education Policy. You can visit our website at climateedpolicy.org. There are many folks participating in this webinar today and not with us today who are partners with us in that coalition and helping to think through what's most needed to support more policies in this arena. And as part of that work, we are writing up policy summaries and tracking them on our website. These are a couple of examples of the one-pagers that feature state policies. We also now have a series on local policies. And these are meant to be resources not just for advocates, but also for legislators who want to know, how can I help to advance climate literacy in my state, or school board members or other decision makers. And then lastly, our coalition also recently contracted 7 November, a communications and PR firm, to do a deep dive into a couple of those places where policy has successfully advanced, and conduct a series of interviews and analysis of publicly available information to understand what were the communications strategies in play in each of those instances, and what are some of the high-level lessons we can all learn about how to advocate for and communicate around climate change education policy in a successful manner. We're pretty happy with this report, and I hope that you will have a chance to check it out. And we just look forward to continuing to learn with you all. Thank you for all of the resources that were shared in the chat today. I think we're going to be doing some deep dives and look forward to just continued conversation and learning. Today revealed that there is so much more that we could unpack and learn about when it comes to how we can work together to make sure that climate change education is part of the comprehensive suite of solutions that we're looking at when we're addressing the climate crisis. And that is all for me. And thank you to those of you who stuck around for that spiel.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Whew. A+ to Pam and Lisa and Sarah. There is so much to be learned. And as Sarah mentioned, lots of resources in the chat. We're going to continue the conversation on EE Pro. But first, before we close, I want to let you all know that, yes, everyone's going to get a copy of the recording straight to your emails, and a copy of the chat notes with all of the wonderful resources. So many shameless plugs and notes and teacher learning institutes going on this summer and courses. You all get that in your email inboxes very soon. And one quick save the date. In about 4 weeks, we have another webinar coming. Results of another survey, nature preschools in the US and the growth of what we've been seeing over the last 10 years. Christy Merrick, the director of Natural Start Alliance, and Emily Van Lan, our conference and communication specialist from Natural Start, will be joining us, and they have so much wonderful information to share. check out the link and you can register for that now. More plugs for Natural Start. Registration for their virtual conference is now open, and that's happening later this summer at the end of July. Everyone is welcome to join. If you are interested in early childhood learning, please join us. We're going to be virtual, so you can join from anywhere in the world. And one last plug about our conference. Lori already mentioned it in the chat earlier, but we are 2 days away from closing the call for proposals. So you've got a little bit more time. Submit your conference proposals now. We are also virtual this year for our research symposium and our annual conference in October. So get your conference proposals in soon. And that's all, folks. Thanks again for joining us this last hour. We'll keep the conversation going, and maybe we'll think about doing another webinar soon about what us as educators can do with all of this information and what are all the wonderful resources out there to teach about climate change in the classroom. So thanks again. Take care, everybody, and we hope to see you on another webinar very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Have a
Take
good
care, everybody.
evening. Thanks, Ann and Sarah and Lisa and Pam. Amazing.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Lisa,
Bye.
great job. Really great job.
Thank you.
And Pam, thanks for jumping in with the questions. Sarah, you fit it all in, and Ann, you got it all in. So, and lots
So many questions.
of chatter in the chat. So
Yeah,
Lisa
really nice
did
job.
really good. And we could have probably stayed on for another 3 hours if they wanted to
For
ask
sure.
other questions. So thanks so much.
Nice high engagement score on your webinar. So.
For sure. Have a good one, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.